The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. It is one of the most coveted trophies in the world, but are gold medals really gold? Well, mostly, they're not. The gold medals given out these days are nearly entirely silver and are plated with pure gold to give them that iconic sheen. Silver medals are, of course, made with silver, and bronze medals are a combination of copper and other metals like tin or zinc. And while winning an Olympic medal is priceless, the value of the materials in the medal are not. In recent games, some of the materials used to make the medals have come from recycled cell phones. Mass Mutual celebrates women's sports history and understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a Mass Mutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
Tankinis, bikinis, monokinis. Walmart is the best kept secret for stylish summer swimwear. Make a splash with hot summer essentials like beach bags, sandals, and more. Find your style at Walmart.
Awaken your senses with a curiously refreshing Hendrick's Cucumber Lemonade.
Curious how?
Cue the aroma.
Marvelous.
Cue the taste.
Magnificent.
Cue the cucumber.
That's the refreshing secret.
Hendrick's is uncommonly crafted with cucumbers, roses, artistry, and imagination. Other gins are ordinary, but Hendrick's is
refreshingly curious.
Discover Hendrick's Gin cocktail recipes at hendricksgin.com. Please drink the unusual responsibly. Hendrick's Gin, 44% alcohol by volume. Bottled and imported by William Grant & Sons, New York, New York. Copyright 2024.
The Athletic.
MotoGP 2024's Big Three went at it again in epic style in the French Grand Prix at Le Mans. But which of them is going to be world champion, and which two of them probably are going to be teammates in 2025? That is among the many things we're going to try to figure out on this episode of the Race MotoGP podcast with me, Matt Beer, Val Khorounzhiy and Simon Patterson, coming to you a day later than we sometimes do on this occasion because Val had a little bit of a detour this weekend. We sent him to Formula E at Berlin, which meant he was busy in a different paddock, but I suspect he had at least 0.5 of one of his eyes on MotoGP throughout the weekend. Yeah, He's nodding. And Simon, you're recording with us this morning, but I did hear you spent quite a lot of Monday waiting for roadside recovery somewhere in France. So how's the van?
The van is broken, which is less than ideal. And yeah, we're currently on the road in a hire car, which is, complicated.
Yes, right at the start of just like the 12 European races in a row or something like that. So good effort, van. Val, did you miss MotoGP last weekend?
Well, I mean, I did tune in. You mean miss doesn't have it as the focus of my undivided attention, whether I miss that, which, both a yes and a no. But it occupies enough of my brain to where, yesterday was the rookie test day in Berlin, so it's still going on. And on my way back, I was walking, just decided to take a walk back to where I needed to be to the train station. And I put on the Allman Brothers in my headphones, and I was walking around thinking of what I'm going to say in the podcast. So clearly, I didn't miss it enough. I could miss it a little bit more.
I suspect that even when you're avidly watching the Super Bowl, a little part of your brain is still thinking about Fermin Aldiger somewhere.
Yeah, wide receiver Fermin Aldiger.
Let's talk Le Mans, and it was an absolutely fantastic weekend of racing again. Jerez had set quite a high bar for this season, and then Le Mans being a three-way fight with Jorge Martin, Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia, especially with Marquez coming through from absolutely nowhere on the grid, made this one even better, I would say. But a double win for the man who came away from Jerez looking a bit shaky. Martin really proved something this weekend, I'd say. What do you reckon, Simon?
Yeah, for me, this was a really, really smart one for Jorge Martin. It was slightly different from what we've seen in the past. I know Val agrees with me because I pitched something post-race and he was like immediately on the same wavelength. Jorge Martin, not once but twice, was very intelligent about how he went about this race during it. The first one was choosing early on to sit in behind Pecco Bagnaia whenever Bagnaia was trying to clear away from the pack behind. That's dangerous territory to be in, because that's something that Bagnaia is so good at, controlling these races from the front. So to be able to slot in behind him, to be able to maintain the pace, to feel like he had something for when he needed it was something that I thought that, in the past we wouldn't have seen from Martin, because old Martin would have gotten past Pecco, went a second and a half lap faster and crashed. So there was something to what he did there. There was something that we saw from that. But then the second thing was whenever Marquez started closing down on them, because at that point he realised that he did have to pass Bagnaia, leave, MotoGP's most difficult to overtake rider for Marquez to deal with, and try and put as much distance between the battle behind them as he could, so that he had a chance at winning it. And he did exactly that. It paid off. The plan worked to perfection, and he won the race. Really, really clever. Really, really shows how he's starting to mature as a rider, and how he's thinking more about, winning races rather than leading every single lap of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think Le Mans didn't maybe test his tire management skills as much as some of the other tracks will, and ultimately that will help, and that will contribute to the fact that he was still super, super quick at the end of the race, whereas, in some of the other tracks, you will have to see how his pace drops over the event. But I honestly, I liked the call right away to just hang back, because as good as Bagnaia is at what you said, Simon, it is also maybe good for Jorge Martin not to try to set the pace out front, but to sit back and just allow somebody else who has a very proven pedigree to do it. Just allow him, match his pace, which means matches tire conservation, whatever. And then clearly, when he needed it, Martin had something extra in reserve to go get the position. But still, extremely bold, because just thinking about that race until it got really good, there was a bit of frustration for me, because it felt like every time somebody tried something, they paid the price. Because overtaking was not easy. It's Le Mans. Overtaking is not easy. So everybody who tried to overtake, it's almost like all the positions that were being gained not through great overtakes, but because somebody messed up trying to overtake somebody else, or just messed up, went off track, got a long lap penalty, whatever. But in the end, we did see some proper, a proper overtake for the win, a proper overtake for second place, so can't really complain there.
Yeah, overtaking was an interesting one this weekend. To me, and I might be offending some veteran purist listeners here, I felt like it was just about the right level of difficulty. I do not want overtaking to be impossible. I don't want this to just be a procession. But I don't want it to be a foregone conclusion that someone is coming past. And you can't say overtaking is impossible in MotoGP on a weekend where Marquez comes through from 13th on the grid to the podium twice. Admittedly, he did a lot of that work at the start, but not all of it. And you definitely can't say it's impossible when Jorge Martin is passing Pecco Bagnaia, probably the hardest person on the grid to pass for race wins. But yeah, I absolutely agree. To be willing to sit in behind Bagnaia. It's amazing how Martin manages to even make the act of sitting in behind someone into something a little bit bold and aggressive by going, I'm going to sit in behind the person who everyone else would just want to pass immediately, because they're going to control the race and be impossible to get under braking otherwise. Bagnaia did lose quite a few points to Martin this weekend. Martin scored 37, Bagnaia only 16, so the points lead is now up to 37 again for Martin. The man who couldn't lead the championship for more than 24 hours until very recently has now led it for this well over a month now. This feels properly established. Did we ever find out what went wrong for Bagnaia in the sprint on Saturday? Because that was bizarre, to go from second on the grid to nowhere and then trundle into the pits after a little gravel trip. That made no sense.
No, it didn't. Clearly something was wrong. It was pretty obvious that the Ducati were kind of downplaying what it was in the aftermath of that. But there had to be something technical for what we saw. That wasn't just Pecco Bagnaia waking up on the wrong side of the bed. It wasn't just, the tyres not feeling great. There was something pretty fundamentally wrong there, because we see from these sprint races, even if you're not feeling fantastic, you stay out as long as you can, because you never know what's going to happen, and you might end up with a few important points. There's, I'm sure, a point in the sprint race at Jerez where Danny Pedrosa never expected to be on the podium. And then within a few minutes he was. So you don't just give up, and Bagnaia is smart enough to know that. So there must have been something kind of deeper wrong there that we're never going to find out about. But, there was vague references made to it by Ducati that, yeah, we don't know. It kind of sounded like something like he'd crashed the bike previously and bent the frame or something like that. Something that like wasn't instantly diagnosable until he started riding it, and suddenly it felt really different. But you know, that's wild speculation.
Yeah, Marquez voiced a theory from overtaking Bagnaia that he one of the ride height devices maybe wasn't engaged, but I don't know if that is just a kind of default thing you might suspect when a bike is off the pace for no reason in a race in the 2020s.
Yeah, it really
and
is.
then on Sunday, an interesting one for Bagnaia to get defeated in the way that he did, because in a way Martin kind of pulled off a Bagnaia defeat on Bagnaia, but I don't know, I still think Bagnaia's position looks a lot stronger than it did a couple of races ago, where a lot of things were going wrong. He seemed to have no race pace, and it just looks like a puzzlingly weak title defense. But even though he's back on the pace, Martin is not looking like Martin. Apart from that Jerez Grand Prix mistake, Martin is not looking like old spec Martin. He's got all the speed, but he's also got a lot of intelligence. I'm almost at the point where I would bet very strongly on Martin just seeing this through. I know we're only a quarter of the way into the season, but he's coming across like a man who's identified most of his problems and done something about them. Would I be wildly bold to start putting money on Martin for champion at this point, or is it starting to look a bit more sensible? I know he's on a satellite bike, Simon, and you know their satellite bikes don't win championships. Let's just establish that. But ignoring this,
whose money is it? Whose money are you putting on it?
All my daughter's savings.
Yeah, that sounds fine. But no, to be honest, it's 38 points is, I think, more than it feels like, even under the sprint format. Like it's a considerable gap, genuinely. Not just at this point of the season, at any point of the season. Like we used to be back in the day before the Bagnaia Quartararo comeback. 38 points was honestly pretty close to unassailable. Like it was not something that riders regularly overcame. So it's a significant claim. And for me, what's going on right now is just a continuation of the end of last year. Both of those guys, Martin and Bagnaia, are quick, and they can beat one another any given day in a dogfight duel or fairly comfortably, but it does feel like Martin is just having an easier time accessing that speed, that he is like the speed is less fragile. Bagnaia keeps having those things where sessions just don't work out, usually the sprints, but it's not just technical issues, it's just the pace doesn't hold up. Whereas for Martin, apart from some race longevity questions, he's always up there on the grid. He doesn't really have that many bad sessions. He can crash, but he's never slow. So yeah, no, I do feel good about his chances. I think he's a very credible threat. And that, again, 38 points is really not nothing. It's a considerable amount.
It's a whole weekend maximum score under this format as well that he's now got in his pocket.
And I think 1 point, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's psychologically handy as well to know that you can crash and your main rival can win and you're still in the points lead as well, which is, you just don't need to do it in both races on a weekend. I totally. The key thing for me that you said there, Val, was he's never slow. If you look at any session, any race and go, who's going to be quick, it's Martin. I don't think there's anyone else on the grid you can make that assertion with that level of confidence. But Val, when we were planning this episode, you declared that you would fight anybody who said that Marc Marquez isn't in the title fight, which to me means you're probably going to be punching Marc Marquez in the face because he's the person who's been loudest in insisting that he's not going to be champion this year. But I wouldn't fight him. But looking at his situation now, I wouldn't disagree with you on this, Val. Marquez is now third in the points. He's only 2 more points behind Martin than Bagnaia is, and after his worst day as a Ducati rider at Le Mans on Friday when he was off the pace and crashing, and then a poor qualifying, to come through from 13th on the grid to those race results, a second and a third, was absolutely phenomenal. So I'll let you go first on this, Val. Can you see any credible way in which Marquez isn't in the title fight, and who are you going to fight about this?
Well, I don't actually want to fight anybody. I overestimated my fighting spirit. I'm quite worn down by the weekend, so it'd be, I think, a one-punch knockout. If that's a term in boxing, I have no idea. Basically, he lacked single lap pace. I think he was fine on race pace to begin things, but there's a difference between fine and being quick enough to go from 13th to second twice. And it's been a second weekend in a row where clearly just on race pace, he is a very credible contender for the win. I don't think we expected at Le Mans that. I also don't think we expected him to be bounced in Q1. But the seeming ease with which he overcame that, and the fact that we're seeing that Marquez thing once again of the really Honda era specific thing of he looks fast but okay, and then he finds an extra 3/10 when it counts the most. Like those 3/10 he's just holding back in his pocket, and he can access them over a race distance anytime, wherever, and he's getting KTM level first laps consistently. So we know the KTM's great off the line, but how do we explain the fact that Marquez is the one guy in the Ducati camp who's having no issues whatsoever gaining 4, 5, 6 positions on opening laps, to the point where whatever qualifying problems exist are massively mitigated. 40 points back is not ideal. Having a year-old Ducati is certainly not ideal. And right now, Barcelona's coming up. That's not a track he particularly likes, not a track that particularly likes him. He's won there twice in MotoGP. He won in 14 when he was winning everything, and he won in 19 when Jorge Lorenzo, his teammate, then hilariously wiped out basically every single rival. So that'll be a big test, that track and what he can do there and how much he can score the points will be a huge, huge test. But he's up there all the time. If he isn't in title contention, then who is? Why is Bagnaia in title contention then? He's 2 points ahead, and there's not been a gulf in performance between those two. So for me, it's either we say that Martin just has it, and we don't run the rest of the season, or Marc is, for me, 100% in this.
Simon, what did you make of Marquez's weekend? Did you think on Friday he was in as much trouble as it seemed?
Yeah. The thing that's kind of convinced me that Val's right and that there's a championship fight coming here involving Marquez is how much trouble they were in on Friday, because they dug themselves out of it super, super quickly. And that, to me, more than anything else, says that him and Frankie Carcetti are building a relationship really quickly that works really well and is able to find solutions. I've spoken to Frankie a fair bit, and it's quite obvious from listening to them that the two are still learning how each other works, and that's maybe as big an adaptation process as Marquez learning how the Ducati works, because at the end of the day, Frankie's the guy that's helping him make the bike work. So there's a process there. But they had big problems on Friday. They sat down, they looked at everyone else's data, they looked at Marc's data, and suddenly on Saturday morning the whole thing was fixed. That, I know he messed up Q1 and didn't go through to Q2, but that was his own mistake. He admitted as much. But the fact that they had the potential to do something very different with it, the fact that they had the potential to, and then immediately get stuck into fighting for the sprint race win, I think that is the indicator that everything is starting to come together at a very rapid rate. And there's no point in anyone else even turning up to Sachsenring at this point. I've been convinced of that for a while, but that's another weekend that shows it. And once he starts getting a few race wins under his belt, and once he starts chipping away at that gap to Martin, and maybe Martin makes another mistake or two, suddenly he's right in the fight. And it's also worth remembering that we are only a quarter of the way through a season. There's a lot of racing still to come and a lot of points still on the board.
Yeah, and of all the people, apart from the fact that the GP23 might be outdeveloped still by the GP24, Marquez is the one who is the lowest point on his learning curve mountain as he's just switched to this team. But which also leads me on to my other thought about what I liked most about the Marquez comeback this weekend was when he was talking about what they'd changed on Friday and what had gone wrong. Like you said, Simon, they looked at everyone else's data. So it sounded like him and Carcetti were doing their own thing a little bit on Friday. And Marquez has talked before this season about getting to the point where he's trying to adapt the bike to him rather than adapting him to the bike. And it sounded like they went in a bit of a blind alley on that based on how Marquez described their Friday work. And then the way Marquez put it was, looked at what Bagnaia was doing, looked at what Martin were doing because they're the quick ones, copied them, adjusted it a bit. And this is something we've never seen before. Marquez in a big team full of other fast riders with a ton of other people's data to look at. So he can do that and go, oh, these guys are quick too. Now I'll put my own spin on this. And potentially this is we're not going to get, I still don't think we're going to get the best ever Marquez here because he's that bit older. He's had the injuries he's had. He's not the Marquez he was half a decade ago. But he's now a Marquez with a bunch of people to learn from who are probably as quick as him, but he's still got that extra little Marquez edge. And I think this is, listening to him on Saturday, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't foresee this element of Marquez at Ducati, the fact he could sort of sponge up the learning from the people who are really quick on that bike and then potentially do even better with it. That's a bit dangerous for everyone else. The other thing, I said that's the thing that impressed me most about his comeback. We talked about his starts. I haven't watched them a billion times. I haven't done like a Val level of replay analysis before making this point. His getaway is great, yeah, and he did say it was his best MotoGP start. I don't think he makes up that much off the line in either race relative to what he does through the first couple of corners. And okay, he's arriving with greater momentum, but the racecraft he's showing through the opening corners, it's like everyone else has kind of forgotten what gaps to close off or forgotten that you shouldn't leave space, and he's just seeing potential that other people don't seem to be. And that's that you can have as good a whole shot device as you want, but you've got to then know what to do when you get to the first braking zone and where to position your bike in the first corners. And that is where Marquez was making up so much ground in both these races. I think
a bit of it is being able to see those gaps, and a bit of it is being more confident in taking them than other riders would be. I mean, we've heard, at least one other rider that he's sharing a grid with and went past early on in both races at the weekend, complaining about hard passes this weekend again. And I think that Marquez is he's just more confident doing them. He's more confident being quite aggressive in the opening laps. The other guy that's amazing off the line in MotoGP and made up a ton of places at the weekend after qualifying really badly is Brad Binder, who is also notoriously one of the more aggressive overtakers in the championship. And I think it's more the aggression than anything else. It's the ability to say, you know what, I'm going through there, and you guys can just think whatever you want about it. You just do whatever you want, but I'm going through there. I think that is a relatively unique thing, and it's something that Marquez is very good at.
We love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn, and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
Tankinis, bikinis, monokinis. Walmart is the best kept secret for stylish summer swimwear. Make a splash with hot summer essentials like beach bags, sandals, and more. Find your style at Walmart.
This episode is brought to you by Trojan Condoms. Experience more with Trojan Bearskin Raw, America's thinnest latex condom among leading brands. Enjoy triple-tested Trojan quality with a natural feel for your most thrilling adventure yet. Trojan Raw is also available in non-latex, designed to increase body heat transfer between partners. Trojan Bearskin Raw. Let's go. Tap the banner to buy now.
Well, the racing on track at Le Mans was fantastic. The chat in the paddock was pretty good too, because we're getting towards a point where we are going to find out who is on what bike for 2025 among these big three. Yeah, Ducati already has Bagnaia under contract, but who is going to be beside him? Will it keep the faith with Enea Bastianini, who's actually having a pretty decent season, just being overshadowed a bit by these three? Or will it be Martin? Will it be Marquez? I love the fact that on Saturday, Martin needed no invitation to come out with a line about how his pace and actually being championship leader gave him power for contracts for next season. It's like he's not wasting a chance to go, by the way, I'm on the market, what are you going to do about it? Simon, how do you see this falling into place at the moment? Who among this big three, and then all the dominoes behind it, who's going where? Who's Ducati going to sign?
So there's two scenarios here. And I should say that, first of all, I think the key decider, the linchpin for the next big decision-making process, the next few big steps, will be finding out what Pramac are doing. Yamaha sound like a manufacturer that are pretty confident they have a satellite team for next season. Gresini have denied categorically that they will be riding anything but Ducatis next year. VR46 have said that they are most likely riding Ducatis next year. I think they put it at 80% chance whenever Uccio was interviewed. And Pramac, whenever they've been asked about it, have kind of repeatedly said no comment. So, I mean, reading between the lines, it's pretty obvious who's probably going to be that Yamaha team next year, isn't it? What that will mean, I think, is that VR46 will get one factory spec bike in their team, and Gresini will get one factory spec bike in their team. What I think the two options are then is that either we'll see Jorge Martin replacing Enea Bastianini at the factory. We'll see Enea Bastianini replacing the probably set to retire Alicia Spargaro at Aprilia, and Marquez will get a factory bike at probably Gresini, but if not at Pramac, if you know they end up staying with Ducati. And someone did suggest at the weekend that maybe the option of having Marc Marquez in the team is one of the lures that Ducati are dangling in front of Pramac at the minute to try and convince them to stay. The other option is that Marquez ends up on a factory bike, Martin goes to Aprilia, and Bastianini replaces Marquez or Martin at Pramac or Gresini, whichever way you take from it. For me, option A is the most likely. I think it's the kind of the perfect solution to everything. Martin gets his factory bike that he so desperately needs, and I cannot stress this again. Factory bikes and satellite teams are not the same as factory bikes. They're not as same as a factory team. It's all the other stuff around being a factory rider that Jorge Martin wants right now that he doesn't get at Pramac. He's adamant that he needs a factory bike. So he wants that. He wants the red one. Marquez, I think, is looking increasingly comfortable in Gresini, sorry. We saw again at the weekend, the guy just looks so relaxed. He looks happy. He's dancing, he's singing, he's clapping. He looks like he's having good fun for like the first time I can remember it since like 2014. He looks like young Marc Marquez again. And I think the only thing that he thinks he's missing to be consistently fighting with the factory bikes at the front for the win every weekend is a little bit more experience in the Ducati and the same spec of machinery as they have. So if he can extract those things from Ducati within Gresini, I can't see any reason why he'd move. I mean, he wants the opposite of what Martin wants right now. He doesn't want the factory team experience because he's been there and done it and knows that it's pretty demanding. It's demanding on your time, it's demanding on your schedule. Martin wants that right now because he wants to feel like the factory rider. Marc just wants to win races. And then with the two of those kind of sorted, I think that we're seeing an Alicia Spargaro that is consistently looking more and more like the version of himself that he said would retire at the end of the season if this was how his performances were. He said he'd stay on if he thought he could fight for wins most weekends. He hasn't done that this year. He hasn't even come close to doing that this year. So I think he'll step over into a Aprilia test rider role, which they really desperately want him to be a part of, because within Aprilia there's a bit of a feeling that they've got an amazing test rider in Lorenzo Savadori, who they absolutely love, but they don't have that kind of performance development rider that some of the other manufacturers have. They don't have a Danny Pedrosa. So they want him for that role. Then, Italian factory, Italian rider, fast guy, fits well, and Enea Bastianini for Aprilia.
You agree with option A entirely, Val, or any tweaks to it?
Oh, I don't know, because it really is a complicated situation. I do see Marc, but more specifically, even than Gigi Dall'Igna, maybe Claudio Domenicali, the Ducati CEO, being tempted by the idea of putting Marc Marquez, one of the most famous motorcycle racers in history, in Ducati Red. It would take a lot, and it would mean both Ducati and Marquez sacrificing things. Marquez would have to pause his Red Bull deal that's been running for years and years and years, because Ducati, the works team, has a monster agreement, and Ducati would have to give up Jorge Martin, who is probably guaranteed titles at some point, right? Who has a very good chance of having the number one plate next year, which he might take to another manufacturer, which wouldn't be great. And who is in a position where even if he can win titles with Pramac or whatever, is 100,000% guaranteed to take it as a personal slight if anybody else other than him is in Ducati Red, because he feels he should have been in that Ducati Red bike 2 years ago already, and that effectively Ducati went back on what he believed it said and instead promoted Enea Bastianini. So, option A does sound pretty tidy, although I certainly there is a big part of me that just wants to see Marquez and Ducati red. That sounds fun. I also think they would do well to try to keep Bastianini too. So they really are the three riders they have. If they were just the single option, there would be no thinking of replacing any of them. Bastianini's 2 points off Bagnaia now. I think that's slightly flattering his performance, but at the same time, in Le Mans, you could make an okay case that he should have won if qualifying didn't go all right. Because again, I look at the fastest laps from the French Grand Prix in front of me, and let's go from sixth up, right? Martin 31.5, Bagnaia 31.5, Marquez 31.4, Espargaro 31.4, Di Giannantonio 31.4, Bastianini 31.1. Set with how many laps to go? Set with 4 laps to go. He was doing it again. He was doing the Enea Bastianini thing again. He was 6 seconds off the leader with 10 laps to go, and he was 2 seconds off the leader at the finish. And yeah, they were fighting up front. They were costing each other time, but clearly this is a guy who, again, had that late race incredible best of pace in Le Mans. And the trade-off is that he's a bit bad over the early laps. But if you can qualify high enough, which he didn't do this weekend, but if you can offset that. And then at the end, you're there to pounce and you're there to score the big points. He's been good. He also knows he's been good, but he just knows that the other two have been better. I think understanding that would allow him to take a gig like Pramac, like Gresini, instead of trying to go to Aprilia or somewhere like that. And I think Ducati would be wise to explore every option to keep this nucleus together. It really is spoiled for choice, and arguably other manufacturers should do everything they can to make sure they at least poach somebody from this lineup. But if I'm Ducati, I don't want to lose any of these guys.
Yeah, Bastianini, it's unfortunate for him that Martin, Marquez and Bagnaia look so good this year, because actually Bastianini's transformed himself from last season. He's been in Q2 every time, and qualifying was such a problem last year. He's racking up podiums and top fives. He's always there, and he's doing very little wrong apart from the odds still slightly wobbly relatively Saturday morning performance. Is there still an argument for Ducati taking the low hassle option of just keeping Bastianini because he's kind of a Pecco 0.5, he fits in? It's not if you're throwing Martin or Marquez in, you're sort of guaranteeing a degree of disruption because of the characters, because of the profile.
Yeah. What
do you reckon, Simon? It's in some ways it's the boring option, but is there still logic to it?
Multiple people have, since I first sort of aired that theory, multiple people have come back to me to say Bagnaia Martin is essentially Senna Prost.
Yeah.
It's that level of two massive characters and massive egos within the same team, and it's going to probably get quite aggressive. But it's already been that way. It's been that way for the last year. Yeah. And I know they're not teammates, but they answer to the same boss, and it hasn't been dramatically out of control. In fact, if anything, Pecco and Marc have had a much more aggressive time of it lately than Marc and Pecco and Jorge. I think that Ducati don't see the need as a result to keep Enea as a safe number 2 for Pecco. I don't think Pecco's the sort of guy who wants a safe number 2 just because he's the reigning champion. I think that he must have come to terms at some point in the last year that Jorge Martin would eventually be his Ducati teammate. And I think that, given everything we see about him and everything we know about him, he won't be lobbying Ducati to keep Bastianini because he's the safe bet for him. And I think Ducati, whenever they have an opportunity of having 2 genuine title contenders, which I'm still not sure Bastianini is, they'll take them. Be it Pecco and Marquez, or be it Pecco and Martin.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's also just there is no way of keeping Martin if you keep Bastianini in factory red.
Yeah.
There's no way. But I think there maybe is a way to keep Bastianini somehow if you promote Martin. And ideally, you just keep both in some capacity. And I think they can't sacrifice Martin on the altar of continuity. And that's, it's a harsh thing to say because I think Bastianini's been fine. I think he's been pretty good. I think he's made as big a step relative to 2023 than really, I think, logically could have been expected. He's done good. It's just, he's in a particular situation to where his ride is the most wanted ride in MotoGP. And vying for it are the championship leader and one of the best riders in history. Just, it happens.
And they're all effectively under the same roof already because they're all with Ducati. Ducati doesn't have to break someone else's contract or go heavy poaching. Everything's there. So it's another sign of how Ducati having a billion teams has worked out pretty well for it over the years. Also, in terms of pairing two big ego riders, Ducati's never really shied away from doing that, has it? It's ended up with one really dominant rider, but it's not intended to. Like the margin Casey Stoner had over his teammates wasn't anticipated when he signed. That kind of happened by default. And Pecco started in Ducati Factory Red as Jack Miller's teammate. With either of them, a kind of one of these two young guys will turn out to be our leader. Maybe both of them will be title contenders' expectation. And then he just asserted himself, and Ducati threw in Bastianini next to him after Bastianini had an amazing season, winning on a year-old bike. So although I've floated the idea of Ducati going for peaceful continuity and a number 1 and number 1.5, it's not actually been Ducati policy to have that. It's had riders whose performances have generated that. I'm just going to throw one complete tangent in here, which I think will be another podcast in itself in a few months' time, but I'm curious. If Pramac ends up with Yamahas, who on earth does Pramac run next season when it's not picking from a Ducati pool of riders? Where are Pramac's riders coming from? Who's going to want to ride that bike?
I think that they're going to have a whole load of fast guys to choose from. Like a potential Pramac Yamaha lineup of Miguel Oliveira and Fabio Di Gianantonio is not unrealistic.
Yeah. Because
there's names, there are people that are going to be cleared out of teams to make room for others. I think that it's, if his run of form continues, then Joe Roberts is going to be seriously considered for a Trackhouse seat. That's going to clear a space for one of those two guys. We know that people like Joan Mir are considering their options, which you have to also think involves Trackhouse and his old boss, Davide Brivio. Or Pramac Yamaha, exactly. Yeah. He goes back to the bike that he won a title on, kind of, in that it's an inline 4 and he can, then there's people like, we know that Firmin Aldeguer is already in a Ducati contract. He's going somewhere next year. If they lose Pramac, it's probably going to be VR46 because he nearly signed for them for this season. They're going to keep Bezzecchi because he's the academy rider if they can. That means that Di Gianantonio's out, guy who won a race last year, guy who's been fighting for the podium this year. Sign him up. There are quite a few contenders whenever you look into it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody will be particularly happy to sign, but there will be people. There will be. Not to say that a Pramac ride is ever a particularly bad thing. It's just Yamaha still isn't really anywhere, is it? We'll get to it.
Just having a little nostalgic reflection at how mad a sentence that is compared to 10 or so years ago. It's like, oh yeah. The Yamaha element's a bit of a turn off, but the Pramac element is what I'm thinking back to the early Dantin days, Alex Hoffman on the bikes with that what that team became, and we're saying now, I'll go for the Pramac bit, but Yamaha, a bit worried about that. Yeah, the passage of time, mad, isn't it? You mentioned Bezzecchi quickly there. Oh, go on, Simon, before I move on to Bez.
Just on that note, something I need to throw in there because I've only really had this revelation over the last 24 hours, but it's relevant. People keep saying, "Oh, why would Pramac leave Ducati and a winning bike to go to something that's a bit useless and lose that ability to win races every weekend?" I kind of completely blanked how we ended up with Yamaha not having a satellite team in the first place.
It's 3.
And it's because the satellite Yamaha team who had the ability to win races on weekends and fight for podiums left them to switch to the up and coming but not yet proven KTM, and now they've got Pedro Acosta on their bike.
No, that's true.
That's why, it's potential. It's all about what could be.
Yeah, which is the situation Yamaha has now put itself back in, where Yamaha is a future hope rather than a safe bet now. Just mentioning Bezzecchi quickly as well, who pace-wise seems like he's got his problems semi-solved, but a couple of crashes in both races in a very strong position in the sprint as well. I was going to ask, before Simon brought up Bezzecchi staying at VR46, I was going to ask where he is in the silly season mix now, because I don't think he's making a compelling case for a move anywhere, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but you have to. He can't also be just as good as his last race, right? He's had a obviously shaky start to the season, a fair few errors when he's quick, and at some points he just hasn't been quick. And as a result, Fabio Di Giannantonio is outscoring him in the championship right now. And I think performance-wise, they're pretty close. So I guess maybe if you look at Bezzecchi, you also have to look at Di Giannantonio. But at the same time, obviously, Bezzecchi's body of work is more cohesive in MotoGP. I think if Ducati somehow keeps hold of all Martin, Bastianini, and Marquez, and I don't know what shape that would take, but then Aprilia would be quite wise to look at Bezzecchi. The talent's still there, the ability, the track record of winning MotoGP races. You know, he made a mistake. I guess we can say now he picked the older spec bike, but he didn't know that the older spec Ducati wouldn't just be quite as competitive as previously, but also that it's just not getting along with it. He can't get it to turn as well as he wants to. I think he's getting understeer, applying the throttle, so his corners aren't right, and he'll be fine. He'll be good. I don't think there's some sort of existential thing going on here. It's just, his timing hasn't worked out, which means he isn't in that crazy race for the second Ducati. But I don't think he was going to be in it much anyway because of the pedigree of opposition. So he's okay. I think worse Aprilia would make a little bit of sense to me. Probably not the way the wind is blowing, but I would look at that.
I think his problem with securing a works Aprilia is going to be that A, Bastianini is going to be in the market, and B, that Maverick Vinales has found form and is likely to stay at Aprilia for 2 more years. Yeah. So I think that locks up both the seats. Yeah. In a way, I think he's going to end up getting what he wanted this year, next year, which will be a factory bike within the VR46 camp, and he'll be happy enough with that because, it's pretty obvious he hasn't performed as well in the opening half of the season to warrant the factory promotion that he, desperately did want, and that's why he stayed at VR46 in the first place. So if Pramac disappear and there's one less factory Ducati team, or one less satellite Ducati team, and his team get factory bikes, I think he should be happy with that. He's still young enough to look at the factory option down the line, but in the meantime, why not get a factory bike at VR46 and try and win some races with it?
Yeah, I think that would be a very good outcome for him. I don't have a massive, like you said, existential doubt about Bezzecchi as a MotoGP frontrunner based on these last few races. It's more that there was a time when we were really excited about Bastianini because of what he was doing on older bikes, and then he moves into the factory team, and last year was bad. This year is absolutely fine, but I don't think we're now thinking of Bastianini as a probable MotoGP world champion in the next few years. He's sort of in that. You're looking at Bastianini now, someone who's a very good MotoGP rider, but there's the big three ahead of him. He's not part of that elite group. Bez at his best last year was making a case for being part of the very elite group, but then you weigh up his MotoGP career so far, and promising rookie season, load of crashes, one very, very good season last year, and then this season a bike doesn't suit him so well. Pretty sketchy so far. And to me, I'm not saying that Bez is bad, shouldn't have a future, should lose his ride or anything. It's just like I'm just reappraising potentially. Is he going to turn into one of the top elite riders, or is he just very good? And I think we're just seeing right now that the evidence is pointing to him being very good, which isn't a bad thing. It's just not big three territory. If we're going to deploy the alien term for the 2020s, I think we know which three our aliens are right now.
And now, 2 pigeons bemoaning the fact you can stream DirecTV satellite-free.
Hey, Frank, a little birdie told me you don't need a satellite dish to get DirecTV.
Which little birdie? Was it Jimmy the Sparrow?
It's a figure of speech. Point is, you can stream DirecTV over the internet now.
Oh, sure. Next you're going to tell me those big birds are made of metal and filled with people, right?
You mean airplanes?
Stream DirecTV without a satellite dish. Call 1-800-DirecTV. Terms and restrictions apply.
When is the last time you made s'mores? Crunchy, gooey, and with everyone's favorite, Hershey's milk chocolate. Whether you're making new memories with your friends beside a campfire, inviting neighbors over for a casual cookout, or cooking s'mores in the oven with your family on a rainy day, enjoy some more of each other with Hershey's S'mores. Find Hershey's milk chocolate bars at your favorite retailer. Time to s'more some more.
This episode is brought to you by Bai. It's Wonder Water. What makes Bai so great? It's simple. From Raspberry Lemon Lime by Sydney Sweeney to Zambia Bing Cherry and Palavo Pineapple Mango, Bai has antioxidants, electrolytes, and no artificial sweeteners. So, for flavorful hydration, choose Bai. It's Wonder Water. Learn more about Bai and discover all of the exotic, bold flavors at drinkbai.com.
Let's run through a few more of the themes from the MotoGP race weekend itself after the little 2025 detour, although I think we are actually going to go straight into 2025 territory on this one quite quickly. Pedro Acosta had his first in-race error of his startling rookie season, but he basically was still brilliant most of the weekend and certainly by far KTM's best performer. So, Val, you've used, again, I'm going to refer to your planning notes. I'm going to quote you directly. You said, it's disgusting how Acosta reliant KTM is right now. Would you like to expand on that?
Man, the word disgusting.
It's a strong word,
really
but what is
the big guns. I was tired after the weekend, so the emotions came to the fore.
Blaming Formula E for the strength of his feelings.
It's ridiculous. I think, watching the race, the Acosta crash, you can kind of see it coming like a few seconds before it happened. So at that point, you just go, it's a clumsy rookie error. It is going to happen. I think it's an error that you shouldn't make, but you can make in your first season. I'm very happy that he didn't wipe out either Aleix Espargaro or Fabio Di Giannantonio, whose bikes he went right between in like an almost low budget version of that Red Bull Ring crash from a few years back with Franco Morbidelli's bike splitting the two works Yamahas, but thankfully not literally splitting them, which was unfortunately a real possibility. For me, the problem at that point is once Acosta went down while potentially fighting for a podium, and I think he felt maybe even for a win, because he was quick this weekend. But once he went down, KTM had nothing, they had nobody, and that's the way it was all weekend. And I don't think all the myriad of explanations, increasingly, the sample size is just building up to where the others cannot live with him, and it almost like the harder they try, the worse they're making their position, if that makes any sense. Binder, just the 3 crash Friday compromised him, and then he had an untidy Q1 and some bad yellow flag luck. I look at the lap times and I don't see a much better weekend there, even if it's clean, if that makes any sense. I look at it and I'm not convinced that he could be running with Acosta. I'm not convinced that he could have made Q2 comfortably. Maybe he could have sniped his way in, but I don't think he had what Acosta had this weekend, simple as. And at the end of the weekend, you start to hear him talk about how they're losing grip on Sundays and how maybe even the KTM isn't interacting well with the Pirelli rubber from Moto2 and Moto3 compared to the Dunlop rubber they had previously. Acosta's clearly interacting well with that new rubber, so maybe it's a question of what you're used to and what your expectations are. But he didn't have a good weekend, obviously. And, Jack Miller was fast over one lap, but again, went backwards in both races, crashed out on Sunday already when he was 12th. So there was already nothing on offer there. They are not holding up their end of the bargain. They are worse than they were 12 months ago. And I don't think the bike is worse than 12 months ago. Maybe there's something in it, particularly like it's having rear vibration issues. Maybe it's unsettling people. It's, you look at Augusto Fernandez, he's nowhere compared to where he was at Le Mans last year. But the bike, I just don't believe it's worse. But if the bike isn't worse, then what's worse? Well, you know the answer to that one. And if I'm KTM, I did not budget for this. I did not go into the season thinking, okay, we'll have Acosta just bring us all the results. And if he doesn't, then all the other guys that are on long-term contracts on big money, Binder, who is signed through 2026, has not, he's not saved our weekend. He is not there to pick up the slack when the rookie goes down. That's the part I described as disgusting. It's not disgusting, but it is. There's something off about it, right? Like, you can see why it's a situation that's not right for KTM.
I mean, basically, KTM have spent, how many years have they been in MotoGP developing a bike to suit this group of riders that they've brought all the way up through the ranks and turned into a bit of a dream team. And then Pedro Acosta came along and just smashed them all into pieces. He's just made them all look absolutely amateur. This is Brad Binder's bike. This is the bike that Binder developed. This is Binder has put the years and work into making it his. And we talk every year at the start of the season about, is Brad Binder a title contender this year? And we came into this season talking about it, and, well, no, not even close to it. But Pedro Acosta might be, and that's pretty wild.
Well, I think you've hit on something key there as well, Simon. Like listeners, during the recording of this podcast, we got a little bit distracted by Val noticing a report in Spanish media about KTM being in play for Jorge Martin as well. And instant reaction was, KTM's full. KTM's always full. KTM's got 1 billion riders it's developing, so KTM just shops in-house pretty much. So we sort of dismissed it, but at the same time, then we kind of just had a little bit more well-off air. And my argument was, is KTM full now it's seen how good Acosta is? And yeah, it's the one rider it needs to keep Acosta. Is everyone else not exactly expendable, but closer?
One thing that's worth noting is that of the riders that were developed by KTM and brought up through the ranks by KTM, one of them is Jorge Martin.
The one that got away.
He is a KTM protege that got away. So he is part of that system. And from their point of view, bidding for him wouldn't be necessarily, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be going outside the grain. It wouldn't be stealing someone else's talent. He's their guy, and it would be their guy coming home again. But I think that their problem is space. They have Brad Binder already signed up on a contract until the end of 2027. I don't think they'll demote him because of how important he seems to be to them, and the fact that, he even got that 4-year contract in the first place is fairly indicative of that. And then on the other side, you do everything possible to protect Pedro Acosta. You do everything you can. If they could sign Pedro Acosta up to a 20-year deal tomorrow, they'd do it.
Yeah.
Because that's how highly held he is in the championship. I think it was Aleix said in his debrief on Sunday that Pedro Acosta is going to dominate MotoGP for the next 12 years.
Yeah.
That's the genuine approach to him in the championship in the paddock.
By the way, Simon, what was Aleix's? Because Aleix was asked about what his dream lineup would be, and who are the two names? It's Pedro Acosta and it's Jorge Martin.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, maybe KTM sees it exactly the same way. Maybe he's the boss there now.
But the thing is, right, if you've got that talent in your ranks, if you've got Pedro Acosta and you've got Brad Binder who's developed the bike to the point where Pedro Acosta is doing this stuff on it, why would you disrupt that? Why would you why would you get rid of Binder and bring in a Martin for what real return? Because everyone seems to, everyone's pretty much of the assumption that Acosta's going to be with these guys every weekend next year anyway. So the only reason at that point to bring Martin in is to deny him to Ducati,
which isn't nothing.
And the only way but the only way you're going to do that realistically is either by really, really pissing off Binder by demoting him to a satellite bike, or trying to sign Martin onto a satellite bike, which he won't do because he's repeatedly said that he doesn't want to. So, maybe this is just KTM deciding to try and win a psychological battle over Ducati by interfering in their contract shenanigans that are already complicated enough just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Oh, and one other thing just to, add to this mix, which is ridiculous and a position that I would never, ever, ever want to put myself in as a racer. Pedro Acosta, Jorge Martin, and Aleix Espargaro are all managed by the same person.
I mean, good effort there. You described earlier the prospect of Bagnaia and Martin in the same factory team at Ducati as Senna and Prost. The prospect of Martin and Acosta in the same factory team is like Senna and slightly older Senna. There's hilarious fireworks potential.
It's like Hulk and Smart Hulk.
I kind of want to see it now. No, there's so many other places I want to see Martin to see what would happen. I think KTM is sorted with Acosta. You mentioned Aprilia. We actually mentioned Aprilia quite a few times in this episode without digging into their weekend, particularly after basically a poor Jerez. Maverick Vinales was back near the front, really quite decent again. Not top level, not looking... I don't think he looked like he was going to win either race at any point this weekend, but not a bad one. We talk about... When Vinales was briefly winning everything, we talked about the fact that it seemed like he might just do that or be 17th every weekend and nothing in between. Le Mans, he was in between in the best sense of being in between, the sort of in between you need to be a title contender.
Yeah. This is an important weekend in a way for Vinales, because I don't think the bike was there quite compared to last year, where it seemed like he had the bike to win Le Mans and he extremely did not. This year, the Aprilia I don't think he could live with Ducati meaningfully. And just a little bit lacking. And he looked rough in both races in terms of race pace, but he held in there for basically the position that was available to him. I felt like he genuinely did maximize what was on offer in terms of his pace both times, which is important. I think he looks good. I think Maverick has... I don't see Aprilia making a wholesale change, right? You would keep one rider as a reference point. And... that rider can be Aleix Espargaro. He's been fine. I don't think he's been bad, but I would struggle to let go of this Maverick Vinales right now in the current form that he's in, because it does feel like more often than not right now he is the faster of the two, even if you still worry about the fragility of that pace on Sunday in particular. But yeah, he's been good. Title contention, I don't know. I mean, Ducati really beat Aprilia into submission this weekend, like really reminded it who's the boss. But obviously now we're going to Barcelona, where some of the expectation is that Aprilia will go 1-2 or 1-2-3. So 1-2-3-4 somehow. So
no,
probably not. Yeah, but 1-2. I mean, last year could be this year again. So suddenly we'll start thinking about it again, I guess. But the good news for Aprilia is that Vinales he's delivering. He's riding well.
I think Aprilia can get the best of both worlds for next year. They can keep the guy who's delivering quite well for them at the minute in the form of Maverick, and they can sign Aleix up to be their test rider for the next 10 years and still have him do, 6 wild cards and, be integral.
Well, they're only allowed
3 wild cards.
Or are they allowed 6? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they're allowed 6.
Lots of
they're
wild cards.
In the Class
Integral
C
part
thing.
of the team, turn up to every Spanish race, be the rider analysis guy. It makes sense, I think, to try and get both of those things at once.
Yeah, well-being. I think Aprilia as well is proving it's here to stay at the front at the moment as well. It's having a strong enough season, given its resources and stuff as well, and where it's come from, where you go, okay, that is very respectable. This bike will carry on winning some races. It's not going to take a rider to a championship ahead of Ducati right now, but it's very decent. It's a place you would want to be if you can't get onto a works Ducati. So yeah, fair play Aprilia, fair play Vinales. You're maybe 2 or 3 race weekends away from us forgetting everything that happened between 2017 and 2024 and going, look how good Vinales is. No question marks. Last thing I want to talk about is the guy most of the massive Le Mans crowd was there to see, Fabio Quartararo, who, bless him, adopts the strategy of, I'm just going to go for it, and if I crash, I crash. At least I've given them something to cheer about. Fair play to Quartararo. Strong weekend, even though it ended in the gravel, I'd say. What do you reckon, Simon?
Before we even get to Fabio's weekend, we have to talk about the Le Mans crowd.
Yeah, fair.
Because it was the most exceptional weekend I've ever been to a circuit. It really was. It was. From Wednesday, when we arrived at the track and spent 2 hours in a traffic jam because they'd just opened the campsite gates, to Sunday afternoon, whenever people, eventually filtered out of the place, it was electric. Never seen anything like it. 300,000 people over the 4 days, 120,000 people on race day alone, literally 10 deep all the way around the track, engaged, insane, screaming loud, enjoying themselves. Just if every weekend could be like that, MotoGP would be the most successful sport in the world, because if you could bottle that atmosphere and sell it, yeah. Club Miche and his team that organised the race, absolute credit to them, because they are the best in the business, any form of motorsport. And about 60% of that crowd were there for Fabio Quartararo because they worship the ground that he walks on. And in his defence, he gives back as well. That's the great thing about it. He knows how much they love him, and he returns the favour. He unveiled a special livery just for his home race on the start-finish straight on Saturday night in front of a grandstand that at 8 p.m, 4 hours after racing had finished, still had like 20,000 people in it.
Wow.
Because they were waiting on him coming out to see them. And don't get me wrong, the other 40% of the crowd are there for Zarco. And despite not quite being as popular, he is still insanely popular as well. But it's like everyone under 30 cheers for Quartararo, and everyone over 30 cheers for Zarco. That's kind of what it feels like a little bit. But the response they got from the home crowd this weekend was phenomenal. And fair play to Fabio, who straight up said it's better to crash at a 6th than come home in 12th. And yeah, he's right. At your home race, whenever you're not performing, yeah.
It's better this season because, a 6th place, Quartararo's finished 6th before, I presume. I haven't checked it, but I think that's a safe bet. He certainly finished higher than 6th. A 6th, it does nothing for me, personally. If the extra 11 points genuinely would have made no difference in my head. What made a difference was he hauled the M1 this weekend to places where I don't feel it belongs still, even if Le Mans is maybe a bit kinder to it than some of the previous circuits we've had. But he grabbed it by the horns, he got it into Q2, qualified pretty high, ran decent in the sprint, and was this competitive in the main race. At that point, you may as well crash. The job's done. It's only going to get worse. You're gonna run out of steam in the second half of the race. You're gonna go back. Better crash. I don't mean that. But I do think it's fine. It's fine. He did good. Had Alex Rins tucked away this weekend. They got it's gonna be a very weird thing about me, but they cut away to a kid in the broadcast shot crying after Quartararo crashed, and my first reaction was buddy, it's fine. This is the 6th place isn't gonna make or break your day. It's okay. I'm approaching children crying with rationality, which clearly would do me well in family life. So
yeah, you just keep pushing the rationality, and the hope is by their 20s it'll be fine. That's what I'm trying.
I've just double checked this, and this is actually quite amazing. The 2021 Catalan Grand Prix is the only time that Fabio Quartararo has finished a MotoGP race in 6th.
Wow!
Oh my god!
See, it was almost missing from his
bizarrely
from his CV.
Out of 94 starts.
I briefly when I was saying that, I briefly thought there is a potential that statistical variance absolutely screws me here, and it was really close.
He finished 7th 4 times last season, so it's not like he's not in that ballpark.
Yeah. The other thing about, you said 6th place won't change his life, Val, those 11 points. Those 11 points would point up to equal 10th in the championship, which, will mean nothing to Quartararo right now, and the chance of him staying there is fairly slim. But seriously, if Quartararo could get into the championship top 10 at the end of this season, that would be a ridiculous achievement.
Monstrous.
That would be,
yeah.
I think he's having
incredible.
A mega year in the situation he's in. I also thought Johan Zarco was brilliant at the weekend in Honda's current situation. He's basically top Honda every second of track time, wasn't he? And
yeah,
I mean, I think I think Joan Mir is better in race trim, but it doesn't matter because he does finish the races.
Every race. How can you tell?
Yeah. But I think even Zarco himself seems to acknowledge that in terms of hitting consistent pace, Mir is more right now. But again, Mir doesn't finish the races. I think I'm super impressed by the fact that Johan Zarco has gone 5 for 5 in qualifying as the top Honda so far on a new bike in new surroundings. From a rider who, was once a fantastic qualifier in his Tech 3 days, right? But was arguably Ducati's worst qualifier last year. MotoGP is just weird. How? Why would that change year on year? I guess it would change because Joan Mir is famously not a very good qualifier. This is what we're having to look at Honda. They might as well just take the Yamahas and the Hondas. Everybody talks about the Japanese Cup. Might as well just make it official and award points for that. That's the situation we're in.
Val, I suspect you'll now spend some of your upcoming day off calculating this.
That was going to be a feature at some point, yes. Yeah, I was thinking summer break or something. I'm 100% going to do it.
Yeah, we have an extra summer break with Kazakhstan gone for now, so that's one of the missions for that set. Also, in terms of variance in what people used to be good at and then weren't or then are again, do you remember when Luca Marini was really good at qualifying?
Do you remember whenever Luca Marini was really good?
Yeah,
indeed. And on that low note, let's leave Le Mans chat here. Listeners, a little reminder that our next podcast, we're going to go over your ideas for how to improve MotoGP after we gave you all of ours last week, and MotoGP gave you all of its own with its 2027 regulations. So send us a voice note or an email to podcasts@the-race.com, or get in touch with us via our MotoGP social media channels at The Race Moto on X or Instagram, and send us what you would change about MotoGP. Rules, formats, marketing. We're open to everything. We'll go through them and we'll chat about some of the best on our next episode next week. Thank you for your time this week. We hope you enjoyed Le Mans as much as we did. We bet you did if you were there. And we're back in your ears very soon.
The Athletic.